The sun was setting over the bustling streets of South Chicago, painting the sky in gorgeous shades of orange and purple. A young black teenager, just 17 years old, was walking home after finishing his shift at Joe's auto shop, where he'd been working part-time for the past year. His hands were still slightly greasy from the day's work, and his blue uniform carried the honest smell of motor oil and hard work. He was tired, the good kind of tired that comes after a productive day. His mind was already wandering to the math homework waiting for him at home and the leftover pizza his mom had promised to save from dinner. That's when he noticed something unusual on the normally quiet Marshall Boulevard. A sleek, midnight blue Tesla Model S was pulled over on the side of the road, its hazard lights blinking steadily in the growing dusk. Next to it stood a well-dressed older woman, probably in her 60s, looking worriedly at her flat tire while talking on her phone. She wore an elegant business suit that spoke of wealth and importance, but right now she looked just as frustrated as anyone else would be in this situation. The boy could have easily walked past. After all, he was exhausted, and she probably had roadside assistance on the way. But something made him pause. Maybe it was the auto mechanic in him, or perhaps it was his mom's voice in his head, always reminding him to help others in need. What would you want someone to do if it was your sister stranded on the road? She'd often say. He adjusted his backpack and walked over, making sure to approach in a way that wouldn't startle her. "Excuse me, ma'am," he called out politely, keeping his voice friendly but professional. "I noticed you have a flat. I work at the auto shop just down the street, and I'd be happy to help you change it." The woman looked up from her phone, surprised. For a moment, there was that familiar flicker of hesitation in her eyes, the kind the boy had seen many times before when approaching strangers. But it quickly melted away when she noticed his work uniform and his sincere smile. "Oh, thank goodness," she said, letting out a relieved sigh. "I've been on hold with roadside assistance for 20 minutes. Are you sure you wouldn't mind? I don't want to keep you from getting home." "It's no trouble at all," he replied, already setting his backpack down and rolling up his sleeves. "I've changed hundreds of tires at the shop. It'll only take about 15 minutes. As he began to work, carefully positioning the jack under the car's frame, the woman introduced herself as the founder of a charitable foundation. She seemed impressed by his knowledge as he explained each step of the process, from loosening the lug nuts to properly positioning the spare tire. "You really know your stuff," she remarked, watching him work with efficient movements. "How long have you been interested in cars?" The boy smiled as he tightened the last lug nut. "Ever since I was little," he shared, wiping his hands on the shop rag he always carried in his pocket. "My uncle used to let me help him work on his old Chevy. That's what got me into it. Now I'm saving up for engineering school. I want to design cars someday." What he didn't know was that this chance encounter, this simple act of kindness on a quiet Chicago evening, was about to change his life in ways he couldn't imagine. Sometimes the biggest moments come disguised as small ones, wearing the humble clothes of everyday life. And sometimes all it takes is the courage to stop and help a stranger to set something extraordinary in motion. The story of the boy who stopped to change a tire was just beginning, and its ripples would soon touch more lives than anyone could have predicted on that ordinary autumn evening. The autumn breeze picked up as the young man worked on changing the tire, carrying with it the familiar city sounds of distant traffic and rustling leaves. His movements were precise and practiced, each turn of the wrench done with the confidence that comes only from real experience. The wealthy woman watched with growing interest, noticing how he handled her expensive car with both skill and respect. "Would you mind telling me about what you're doing?" she asked, genuinely curious. "I should probably know this stuff, but I've always relied on others to handle it." The boy smiled, pausing to wipe a bead of sweat from his forehead. "Of course, ma'am. Right now, I'm making sure the lug nuts are loosened before we lift the car. It's safer this way," he explained, his voice carrying the natural enthusiasm of someone sharing knowledge they're passionate about. "You want to break that grip while the tire's still on the ground, giving you better leverage." As he worked, he continued explaining each step, his voice clear and patient. He talked about the importance of placing the jack in the right spot to avoid damaging the car's frame, about crossing patterns when tightening lug nuts for even pressure, and about checking the spare tire's pressure before installing it. His explanations weren't just technical, they were sprinkled with practical tips and real-life examples from his experience at the shop. The woman found herself drawn into his explanations, impressed by how he made complex mechanical concepts sound simple and logical. "You're quite the teacher," she remarked. "Have you considered that as a career path?" The boy chuckled softly, carefully lowering the car back to the ground. "Teaching's great, but my heart's set on engineering," he replied, his eyes lighting up. "I want to design cars that are safer and more efficient, maybe even create new technologies to help prevent situations like this flat tire in the first place." As he spoke about his dreams, something in his voice caught the woman's attention. It wasn't just ambition, it was determination mixed with practical knowledge. He was someone who didn't just talk about his goals, he was already working towards them, one tire change at a time. "You know," she said thoughtfully, watching him secure the flat tire in the trunk, "I've met many young people with big dreams, but there's something different about you. You have both the vision and the willingness to start from the ground up." The boy wiped his hands clean, looking slightly embarrassed at the praise. "My mom always says dreams don't work unless you do," he shared. "That's why I took this job at the auto shop. Sure, it helps with bills at home, but mostly it's teaching me things I'll need to know later." The woman nodded, understanding dawning in her eyes. She'd built her own foundation from scratch, and she recognized the same spark of determination she'd once had. As the boy gathered his tools, she made a decision that would change both their lives forever. "Wait," she said, reaching into her purse. But instead of pulling out money as the boy expected, she retrieved a business card. "I'd like to hear more about your plans for the future. Would you be willing to meet me at my office tomorrow? I think we might be able to help each other." The boy hesitated, surprised by the unexpected turn of events. He'd helped plenty of people with car troubles before, but none had ever shown interest in his future like this. He thought about his mom's constant reminder to be careful with strangers, but something about this woman's sincerity felt genuine. "I have school until 3:30, he said carefully, "and then my shift at the shop starts at 4. "I can meet you during your lunch break," she offered quickly. "My foundation works with young people like you, people with both the talent and the drive to make a difference. I'd like to discuss some opportunities that might interest you." Standing there on that quiet street, with the setting sun casting long shadows around them, neither of them fully realized that this simple conversation was the beginning of something extraordinary. Sometimes life's biggest opportunities come disguised as small moments of kindness, and sometimes they come with a flat tire and a business card. The next day, during his lunch break, the boy found himself standing in front of a towering glass building in downtown Chicago. His school uniform felt out of place among the bustling professionals in their business suits, but he straightened his tie and walked through the revolving doors with determination. The security guard, seeing his school uniform and the business card he clutched, gave him a friendly nod and directed him to the elevator. The Foundation's office occupied the entire 30th floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a breathtaking view of the city. The boy had never been this high up before, and for a moment he forgot his nervousness as he gazed out at the city spread below him like a giant living map. Somewhere down there was his neighborhood, his school, and the auto shop where he worked. "Quite a view, isn't it?" The woman's voice brought him back to reality. She stood in the doorway of a conference room, wearing a different but equally elegant suit than yesterday. "Thank you for coming. Please come in." The conference room was warm and welcoming, with comfortable chairs and a small spread of sandwiches and drinks on the side table. "I thought you might be hungry since it's your lunch break," she explained, gesturing for him to help himself. As they sat down with their lunch, the woman began asking him questions about his life. But these weren't the usual surface-level questions he was used to from adults. She wanted to know about his dreams, his challenges, and how he planned to overcome them. The boy found himself opening up, sharing things he rarely talked about with anyone. He told her about his single mom working 2 jobs to keep food on the table for him and his 3 younger siblings. About how he'd started working at the auto shop not just for the money, but because he knew he needed real-world experience if he wanted to become an engineer someday. "I wake up at 5 a.m. to help get my siblings ready for school," he explained, his voice filled with quiet pride rather than complaint. "Then I head to school early to use the library computer for homework, since we don't have one at home. After school, it's straight to work at the shop until 8 p.m. Then home for dinner, helping the little ones with homework, and studying until I can't keep my eyes open anymore." The woman listened intently, nodding occasionally but never interrupting. When he mentioned maintaining a 4.0 GPA despite his packed schedule, she leaned forward with increased interest. "And you still find time to help strangers with flat tires," she added softly, a note of admiration in her voice. The boy shrugged, slightly embarrassed. "That's just what you're supposed to do, isn't it? Help people when you can." "Not everyone thinks that way," she replied. "Tell me more about your engineering dreams. What kind of cars do you want to design?" His eyes lit up as he described his ideas for affordable electric vehicles that working-class families could actually buy. He pulled out a worn notebook from his backpack, filled with sketches and calculations he'd done during lunch breaks and bus rides. "I want to make cars that are safe, efficient, and repairable by regular people," he explained, showing her his drawings. "Most electric cars now are luxury items. But what about the single mom who needs to get to work? The family that can't afford expensive repairs? They deserve good cars too." The woman studied his sketches with growing interest. These weren't just daydreams. They were thoughtful designs backed by research and real-world understanding. She noticed how he'd factored in not just engineering principles, but also practical considerations like repair costs and parts availability. "You've really thought this through," she said, genuinely impressed. "But engineering school isn't cheap. Have you looked into scholarships?" The boy nodded, his expression becoming more serious. "I've applied for every scholarship I can find. I've got some small ones, but even with those in my savings—" He trailed off, then straightened his shoulders. "But I'll figure it out. Maybe take a gap year to work full-time and save up more money. I'm not giving up." As the lunch hour drew to a close, the woman stood up and walked to her desk, pulling out a thick folder. Something in her expression had changed. She'd made a decision. What started as a simple tire change was about to become something much bigger, something that would change not just 2 lives, but countless others in the years to come. The thick folder landed on the conference table with a soft thud. The boy looked at it curiously, wondering what could be inside. The woman sat back down, folding her hands on the table as she gathered her thoughts. "Yesterday, when you helped me with that flat tire, I saw something special," she began, her voice warm but serious. "I saw a young person who didn't just have dreams, but was already working hard to make them real. Someone who understood that success comes from both knowledge and kindness." She opened the folder, revealing several documents inside. "Our foundation typically announces scholarships through formal channels, schools, community centers, that sort of thing. But sometimes life presents us with opportunities in unexpected ways, like flat tires on quiet streets." The boy's heart started beating faster, but he tried to keep his expression calm. He'd learned long ago not to get his hopes up too quickly. "What I'm about to offer you isn't charity," she continued, pulling out the first document. "It's an investment. In you, in your community, and in the future you want to build." She slid the paper across the table. "This is a full scholarship to any engineering school of your choice." The boy's hands trembled slightly as he picked up the paper. His eyes scanned the document, trying to process what he was seeing. The words "full academic scholarship" and "including room and board" jumped out at him. "But that's not all," the woman said, pulling out another document. "We're also offering you a paid internship at our foundation's automotive division during summers and school breaks. You'll get hands-on experience with some of the best engineers in the country." The boy sat there, stunned. This was more than a scholarship. It was everything he'd been working toward, everything he'd dreamed about. But doubt crept in, as it often does when dreams suddenly seem within reach. "Why me?" he asked quietly. "There must be thousands of students more qualified." The woman smiled, understanding his hesitation. "You know what most applicants write in their essays? They tell us about their dreams. But you showed me your dreams in action. You're already working in the field you want to enter. You're maintaining perfect grades while helping support your family. And most importantly, you stopped to help a stranger when you didn't have to." She leaned forward, her expression earnest. "We're not just looking for good students. We're looking for good people who will use their success to help others. Your ideas about affordable electric cars? That's exactly the kind of thinking we need more of." The boy looked down at the documents again, his mind racing. Can I talk to my mom about this first?" "Of course," the woman smiled. "In fact, I'd love to meet her. We can discuss all the details together. This is a big decision, and you should take time to think it through. She pulled out one more document. There's just one condition to this scholarship. The boy tensed slightly, but she continued with a warm smile. We want you to mentor other students once you're in college. Share your knowledge just like you shared it with me during that tire change. Help others the way you're being helped. The boy felt tears welling up in his eyes, but he blinked them back. All of his early mornings, late nights, the endless hours of work and study, they were finally leading somewhere. But more than that, he felt seen. Really seen, maybe for the first time in his life. I don't know what to say, he managed finally. Said you'll work hard and make the most of this opportunity, the woman replied. Said you'll keep helping others along the way, that's all we ask. As the boy gathered the documents with shaking hands, the woman checked her watch. You should head back to school now, wouldn't want you to be late. We can set up a meeting with your mother for tomorrow or whenever works best for her. Walking back to school, clutching the folder to his chest, the boy felt like he was floating. The city looked different somehow, brighter, more full of possibility. He thought about his mom, how proud she would be. About his siblings, who would see that dreams really could come true with hard work and a little help along the way. What had started with a simple act of kindness, stopping to help someone with a flat tire, had turned into something life-changing. But the best part wasn't just the opportunity he'd been given. It was knowing that someday he'd be able to do the same for someone else. Word spread through the South Side neighborhood like wildfire. At first, it was just whispers at the corner store, conversations at the bus stop, discussions over fence lines. The story grew with each telling. The boy who helped a stranger with a flat tire and got offered a full ride to MIT. But it wasn't just the scholarship that caught people's attention. It was what the boy did next that really got them talking. The very next day, after receiving the life-changing news, he showed up for his shift at the auto shop right on time, same as always. When his boss tried to congratulate him, the boy just smiled and got straight to work. Still got customers counting on us, he said, rolling under a car that needed an oil change. At school, things were different, though. Other students started approaching him during lunch breaks, asking about his story. Instead of brushing them off, he started organizing study groups in the library. If I can do it, he'd tell them, so can you. Let's figure it out together. The local newspaper caught wind of the story and sent a reporter to interview him. The boy was hesitant at first. He'd never liked being the center of attention. But his mother convinced him that his story might help others dream bigger. You know what the best part of this scholarship is? He told the reporter while working on a car at the shop. It's not just about me. It's about showing everyone in our neighborhood that opportunities are out there. Sometimes they come from unexpected places, like a flat tire on a quiet street. The article ran on a Sunday with a photo of him teaching a younger kid how to change oil. By Monday morning, the auto shop's phone was ringing nonstop. Parents wanted to know if their kids could intern there. Students wanted to know about engineering programs. The boy's boss, overwhelmed by the attention, just handed him the phone. That's when something remarkable started happening. The auto shop became more than just a repair place. It turned into an unofficial learning center. After his regular shift, the boy would spend an extra hour teaching neighborhood kids basic car maintenance. He shared what he knew about engines, but more importantly, he shared what he'd learned about seizing opportunities. It's not just about fixing cars, he'd explain while showing them how to check tire pressure. It's about solving problems. Whether it's a flat tire or a tough math equation, the principle is the same. Break it down, understand each part, and work through it step by step. His mentor from the foundation visited one day, surprised to find him surrounded by EVA students in the shop's parking lot. They were all huddled around an old engine, listening intently as he explained how it worked. This wasn't part of the scholarship requirements, she said, smiling. No, he replied, wiping grease from his hands. But it feels right. These kids just need someone to believe in them, like you believed in me. The foundation took notice. They started providing tools and equipment to the shop, turning those informal teaching sessions into a proper after-school program. Other local businesses got involved too. A computer store donated laptops for CAD training. A retired engineer volunteered to teach basic physics classes. But the most powerful change was in the neighborhood's young people. They started seeing possibilities they hadn't considered before. The boy's story wasn't just about getting a scholarship, it was about the power of helping others, about how kindness could open unexpected doors. One day, while teaching a group of kids how to jumpstart a car, he overheard two of them talking. "You really think we could be engineers too?" one asked. "Why not?" the other replied. "He did it, and he started right here, just like us." That evening, as he locked up the shop, the boy thought about how much had changed in just a few months. His own future had transformed, yes, but watching his community come alive with new hope, that was something he hadn't expected. His phone buzzed with a text from his mentor. "How are the future engineers doing?" He looked back at the shop, where earlier that day he'd helped a young girl understand the basics of electric circuits. Her eyes had lit up with the same excitement he'd felt when he first started learning about cars. "They're amazing," he texted back. "One day, they might be the ones designing the cars I'll be fixing." His mentor replied quickly, "Or maybe you'll all be designing them together." Standing there in the growing dusk, he realized that success wasn't just about rising up, it was about lifting others as you climbed. Sometimes the biggest dreams start with the smallest acts of kindness, like stopping to help a stranger with a flat tire on a quiet street in Chicago. Time flew by like pages turning in a book. 40 years had passed since that fateful day with the flat tire, and the boy, now a young man, stood in front of his dorm room mirror, adjusting his tie for his final presentation at MIT. His walls were covered with engineering diagrams, prototype sketches, and photos of his family back in Chicago. Among them was a framed picture of him and the woman from the foundation, taken at his freshman orientation. Their relationship had grown far beyond that of just a sponsor and student. She had become his mentor, confidant, and biggest cheerleader outside his family. Every month, they'd meet virtually to discuss his progress, but their conversations always went deeper than just academics. "You look nervous," his roommate commented, watching him fidget with his tie for the 10th time. "The whole foundation board will be there today," he replied, double-checking his presentation materials. "Plus representatives from 3 major car companies." He patted the small model car sitting on his desk, his pride and joy, the culmination of 4 years of research and development. His project wasn't just any senior thesis. He'd designed an affordable electric car system that could be retrofitted into existing vehicles, making eco-friendly transportation accessible to working-class families. The idea had been born from those early sketches in his worn notebook, refined through years of study and countless hours in the engineering lab. Walking into the presentation room, he saw her sitting in the front row, wearing the same warm smile she'd had on that first day. She gave him an encouraging nod as he set up his materials. Next to her sat executives from major automotive companies, their expressions curious but reserved. As he began his presentation, his nervousness melted away. This wasn't just about impressing investors or getting good grades anymore. This was about the promise he'd made, to use his education to help others. He spoke about growing up in a community where reliable transportation meant the difference between keeping and losing a job. About families struggling to choose between car repairs and groceries. Then he unveiled his prototype. "This system can be installed in any car made after 1990, he explained, pointing out the key components. It reduces fuel consumption by 85% and cuts maintenance costs in half. Best of all, it can be installed for less than the cost of 3 monthly car payments." The room was silent when he finished, but it was a good kind of silence, the kind that comes when people are truly thinking about what they've heard. The automotive executives were scribbling notes furiously, and his mentor's smile had grown even wider. During the Q&A session, one executive raised his hand. "This is impressive work," he said, "but why focus on retrofitting old cars instead of designing new ones?" The young man smiled, remembering all those hours at the auto shop. "Because people don't need new cars," he answered confidently. "They need their current cars to work better, cost less, and last longer. Innovation shouldn't just be for those who can afford the latest models." After the presentation, his mentor pulled him aside, her eyes shining with pride. "You did it," she said simply, hugging him. "And you did it your way." "I couldn't have done it without you," he replied, thinking back to that evening with the flat tire. "You gave me a chance when nobody else would." She shook her head. "No, you gave yourself a chance long before I met you. Every early morning at the library, every late night at the auto shop, those were your choices. I just helped clear some obstacles from your path." As they walked out of the building together, 3 different executives approached them, business cards in hand. But what made the young man proudest wasn't the attention from industry leaders or the praise from his professors. It was knowing that back in his old neighborhood, the auto shop where he still worked during summer breaks had become a place where other young people came to learn and dream. His mentor had taught him something crucial. Success isn't just about rising up, it's about reaching back to help others rise too. That lesson, even more than the engineering principles he'd mastered, would shape everything he did next. His story wasn't just about one person's journey from fixing flat tires to designing the future of transportation. It was about proving that when someone believes in you, anything is possible, and then becoming the person who believes in others. 5 years after that life-changing presentation at MIT, the young man stood in front of a renovated building in his old Chicago neighborhood. The faded auto shop sign had been replaced with a gleaming new one, Community Tech and Training Center. But underneath, in smaller letters, it still said Joe's Auto Shop, a reminder of where it all began. Inside, the space had been transformed. One half remained a working auto shop, but the other half housed a state-of-the-art classroom and engineering lab. Tools and equipment, both old and new, lined the walls. The smell of motor oil mixed with the scent of fresh paint and new carpeting. "What do you think?" he asked his mentor, who stood beside him, her hair now streaked with more gray, but her eyes as bright as ever. She looked around the space, taking in the students working on various projects, some underneath cars, others at computers designing new systems. "I think you've built something extraordinary," she replied, watching a young girl confidently explain an electric engine diagram to her classmates. "But I want to hear what you think." He smiled, remembering his own days as a teenage mechanic. "I think we're just getting started. Last month, we helped 10 students get into engineering programs with full scholarships. 3 of our graduates are already working at major car companies. And the retrofit program." He paused, still amazed by the numbers. "We've converted over 200 cars to hybrid systems in the past year alone." The center had become more than just a training facility. It was a bridge between the practical world of auto repair and the innovative realm of engineering. Local residents could get their cars serviced at affordable rates, while students learned both basic mechanics and advanced engineering principles. "You know what makes me proudest?" he continued, leading her through the facility. "It's not just about cars anymore. These kids are learning that they can be both mechanics and engineers, that getting their hands dirty and designing on computers aren't mutually exclusive." They stopped at a workbench where a teenage boy was carefully installing one of their hybrid conversion kits. The boy looked up, his face lighting up with recognition. "Sir, I got my acceptance letter yesterday. Full ride to Illinois Tech." The young man grinned, remembering his own acceptance letter from years ago. "What did I tell you? Hard work pays off." He turned to his mentor. "This kid reminds me of myself. Found him fixing his neighbor's cars in his garage after school." His mentor watched the interaction with knowing eyes. "The circle continues," she said softly. Later that afternoon, they sat in his office, looking at photos from the center's first year. The walls were covered with student projects and acceptance letters. A worn business card, the one she'd given him years ago, sat framed on his desk. "Did you ever imagine this?" she asked, gesturing to everything around them. "That day when you stopped to help me with a flat tire?" He shook his head, thinking back. "Never. I just wanted to help someone who needed it. That's still what this is all about, isn't it? Just on a bigger scale now." A knock on the door interrupted them. A young student poked her head in. "Sorry to interrupt, but there's a car broken down outside. Family's trying to get to a job interview." The young man stood up immediately, grabbing his tools. His mentor watched him with a proud smile, remembering a similar scene from years ago. Some things had changed. He wore a button-down shirt now instead of a mechanic's uniform, and his hands were those of an engineer as much as a mechanic. But his instinct to help hadn't changed at all. "Coming?" he asked his mentor. "You might want to see this." Together, they walked outside to help yet another stranded driver. But this time, they weren't just fixing a car, They were continuing a cycle of kindness and opportunity that had started with a flat tire and grown into something that would impact generations to come. As they approached the stranded car, the young man couldn't help but smile. Every ending was just another beginning, and every act of kindness had the potential to change not just one life, but countless others. The real miracle wasn't in the helping hand he received years ago, it was in all the hands he could now reach out to help in return.